So it's time to take a look at the Stabber 2. This is a ship that I've had for a while, been using it for a while as well, and this is a ship that I said should be equal to the Vagabond, and the last update did basically do exactly that. This ship now has about the same stats as the Vagabond from EVE Online, and I love it. The only thing that it's missing now are some, visual aesthetics to make it look like the Vagabond, but stat-wise, it's there. So roll bonus plus 5 seconds on the damage control and minus 37.50% warp drive signature radius penalty, which is very nice. The advanced medium cannon operation bonus will give you some cannon accuracy, activation time, and the important change, plus 7.50% shield booster boost mouth. Now used to be a speed bonus. The Stabber 2 used to be one of the fastest, if not the fastest cruisers in the fastest cruiser in the game. However, now it has received the shield booster bonus. Obviously this is going to be a shield tank ship, and the ship still retains the old bonus on the, I think, thermal and explosive, because one of the older updates they buffed the defenses of the Tech 10, or should I say on the assault cruisers. So yeah, overall these ships have been improved a lot, and I'll also take a look at the other ones as well. This is the build that I have on this ship. Again, when I built the Stabber 2, I wanted it to be identical to a Vagabond, and now, yeah, now I can't stop. I actually can't stop imagining things, and I can actually use it the way I always wanted to use this ship. To adapt this, a diameter, a large booster, a afterburner, large Nosferatu, web, and a scrambler. This is basically how I fly this thing. One of the most fun battles that I've had in the game was versus a Drake. It took me 50 minutes to destroy the Drake, and I used this ship. As I mentioned before, longer battles are the best, and this is honestly one of the more fun ships that I have. I have a sleeper core, which is actually really good with this type of build, with this combination. Basically a second damage control that I have on the ship. Almost 1.2 km per second is the afterburner speed. Yeah, definitely feels slower than before, and the rest of the build is about the same as the build that I've had for over a year now on this ship. The same rigs. 9,000 in shield, 83 to 76%. Small hole on kinetic, but not a big deal. Able to fully recover the shield now in couple cycles, which is actually amazing. 1.7 thousand in the shield boost. I can actually improve that a lot if I want to. If I had the classic integration build, 3p60 integration build, you can get this up to 3000 per cycle, which is half shield almost, which honestly for a cruiser is insane. 341,000 hit point with the damage control, 97 to 98%. Speaking of the damage, this is the sleeper core. It's not upgrade. Maybe I will upgrade, but so far it's the default stats that I have on the ship here. I mean defaults, just the primary attribute on the nano core. Does reduce your DPS, does reduce your repair a little bit, but it enhances your capacitor recharge, which is actually very important when it comes to a active tank, since the Nosferatu can help, but this is kind of like a small capacitor booster that you have, cap booster, since it really recovers capacitor really quickly once it's enabled, and honestly it's really useful. And here you can take a look at the damage control as well. I'm using default stats, no general units or anything like that. Obviously you can enhance that even more. The shield boost power though, that's the main thing on this ship. Now 3.5 thousand if you have a general unit for the shield booster, which is incredible for a cruiser. And the capacitor on this thing is actually not that bad, especially since you can speed tank most ships, and it's generally speaking very tanky. Now, what can you do? What more can you do with this ship? Well, I also thought about a dual booster build. Would be kind of overkill, and for that you would definitely need a capacitor battery. I really wish that we had capacitor boosters, a medium slot module that would use fuel, but once you enable the module it would rapidly recover your capacitor, but it would also eat quite a bit of fuel to be identical to the EVE Online capacitor booster. Would be really lovely to have that module. I think it will be added, definitely slowly going towards that, and when that module is in the game it would be really wild to actually use it. Now this would be a dual booster build. I would say pretty much overkill, and the capacitor is definitely going to take a huge hit. I have just a little bit of power left to fit a medium capacitor battery. Now, funny enough, it should actually work just fine. If you're able to speed tank, and if you're able to I mean, you can speed tank with this ship. It has a very small signature radius. After speed is decent, and it's generally a tanky ship, so a dual booster build can work. However, you definitely would have to tamper with the rigs a little bit more, maybe change some of the rigs into capacitor integration rigs, and maybe you would have to use some of the power grid integration rigs as well to compensate for the two power routers that would be removed from the ship. Anyway, let's see how quickly the capacitor will run down. Now this would definitely boost over half of shield, definitely per cycle. And just a build for fun. I would still prefer a single booster, since you would not have the best resistances with only one adaptive. So I personally prefer resistance over repair, but in this case we can actually combine that. So interesting scenario. And let's see, it does give decent, the capacitor battery does give a decent amount of capacitor. Let's see how many cycles it will take for the boosters. I think, yep, 2 cycles and 2.5 cycles until the battery's capacitor is depleted. Obviously we can enhance that with general units. You can definitely push that to 3.5 cycles, but this is pretty much what you can expect from 2 large boosters on a cruiser. Will have a significant impact on the capacitor. Now, I haven't personally been using a build like this. I was using classic large booster since it was already enough, and now after the buff it would be more than enough. So what else can I do? You can actually do a build with a large capacitor battery, medium Nosferatu, and a large booster. Also works. Since you have a micro warp drive bonus, you can do a dual propulsion build, or you can also do a kite long range build. Since you have a warp drive signature radius penalty reduction bonus, means that, yeah, you can definitely use that. I would actually love if it had a afterburner boost on the roll bonus, since it is an active tank, right? So equipping a micro warp drive and a shield booster is going to have a huge impact on the capacitor on the ship. I would say an afterburner bonus would be more beneficial. If not a afterburner bonus, maybe a default speed bonus. I feel like it's kind of funny that they've given the ship a micro warp drive bonus and a shield booster. I mean, the booster is fine, but a micro warp drive, I guess. I mean, I guess it's multi-purpose. You have a lot of different ways to build this thing. This would be a dual propulsion build that I haven't been using. I usually use an afterburner on the ship, since it just works perfectly fine with an afterburner speed tank after all. So that's also one of the things that you can do. You can also do the classic DPS builds with a micro warp drive, damage control, a large extender, or a large shield generator. Both will just get the job done. The shield generator is a bit more expensive, but at the end of the day they have enhanced the passive shield regeneration on all of the assault cruisers, which is amazing actually. And now speed tanking is potentially better, but at the same time I would say that needs to be even enhanced even more in order to have a fully fledged passive shield tank. However, you can still perform a passive shield tank just fine with these ships. The regeneration is actually much better than it used to be. It's just one of the examples of the developers listening. They kind of fulfilled our wishes with the buffs. I would say more buff are required for passive shield regeneration, and with time we will get there. I'm very sure of it. Now I'm actually very sure of it that we'll get there step by step, and most of the ships have been improved in a good way. And a build like this would be a classic DPS build that I run on the Cinnabal, Celos, Macariel and other Minmatar and other hybrid faction ships. Dual scrummers, dual webs or 3 scrummers depending on the target, that's up to players' preference. But yeah, a build like this is going to work just fine on the Stabber. It also has received a DPS buff, I believe. I have tank rigs, but you can definitely get some really scary DPS out of this ship for sure. 19,000 shield, lovely. With a generator I can get that up to 24,000 I believe, and with a general unit that is going to jump up even more, so you do have a good buffer when it comes to the shield, and that's going to be recharged very quickly if required. Now, let me play around with the build a little bit more. Can you use this ship for PvE? Now, a lot of players like to use battleships, battlecruisers for PvE. However, there is also a special place for cruisers in that category. Cruisers, frigates, destroyers are actually really good for storyline missions. Since they're difficult to scan down, they offer very good maneuverability and they offer some good defense as well as good DPS. And it's much more difficult to catch a cruiser than to catch a battleship or battlecruiser. So if you like to do PvE, yeah, you can definitely go for a cruiser. I actually recommend for storylines to use cruiser because again they're very difficult to catch and difficult to scan down and very slippery if you are actually flying them properly. And this would technically be a high sec build for this ship. Now let's take a little ride and let's see how the Stabber 2, or well, at this moment I think I should start to call it the Vagabond because practically is one, but let's just see how this ship will perform. In the past, on certain targets, I actually used the Stabber 2. I used it against battlecruisers, against cruisers, against, in some cases, faction cruisers, battleships. It is a fantastic speed tank, able to speed tank missiles, and now after the buff, it would be I'm just saying, in some of the previous encounters where I fought with Ravens or Raven Strikers and Raven Navies with this thing, I'm fairly sure I can actually hold one now perfectly fine with this ship, and I can speed tank them. I forgot to use a afterburner, but that's fine. I forgot to switch the micro warp drift back to an afterburner, but it will do. So how much shield does this thing recover? Well, it does recover a lot of shield, and you can actually benefit from that bonus a lot if you have a tanky build. And this is one of those ships where I would actually recommend that you use a tanky build for it, because it will just work, you know, perfectly. Of course, I mean, if you want to use a DPS build, you can. You have the option to do that as well. But if you want a endurance ship, this is going to be perfectly suitable for that job because of the bonus that it has received. And just one example of the good recent change that we have seen in game. I'm definitely curious to see how the other 3 cruisers will work. Very curious to see if they became a lot more similar to their EVE Online counterparts. I think they did. I'm fairly sure that they also got pretty close. One thing that I don't really like, or should I say one thing that needs to be improved, I would say the ship visual. Now, if you already have a ship that's a bit, upgrades over the previous variants, then you should definitely make some visual changes to the ship. If you look at the Vagabond from Evo Line, it has these fins, which are honestly kind of iconic now. Fins at the front of the ship. Now, I would say Stabber 2, since definitely upgraded Stabber, I would say does deserve to receive some visual changes as well. Just Fly wants to differentiate the ship from the previous counterparts, from the previous generation Stabbers, and I would say the same thing for the other more special or advanced ships. And also, with the recent change and with the recent tech level restriction removal, which is actually, I would say, the best change of the whole year actually, you are able to fly these ships even if you are not tech level 10. So yeah, it's amazing actually. It's one of my favorite changes that we have seen in the game in the whole year, in the last 2 years, 3 years, I don't know, I mean, that's one of the best changes ever to date seen. So now, even if you're like tech level 6, 7, you are able to fly the ship if you have the skills for them, that is. I think they also removed that from certain skills, which is also at the same time pretty amazing. And the thing that we have been asking for them for ages, finally in the game. Not in the perfect time, but at the same time I would say better late than never. And a lot of players are very happy with the recent changes done to the tech level stuff to the ships, and more will come. I'm fairly sure more things will be changed. The DPS output, despite me having a tanky build, the DPS output is actually really solid for this little boat. It does slap. I mean, autocannons are definitely very powerful. And afterburn would make me take a lot less damage, obviously, but I'm just demonstrating how much shield this thing can recover. It doesn't use a lot of capacitor. You can easily recover the capacitor with the Nosferatu. And this is the thing with the Minmatar ships, or in this case with most Minmatar and shield tank ships, with the exception of the Phantasm and some other special faction ships or faction ships. Their capacitor is not the best. Now the capacitor on the Stabber 2 now, I actually feel like it's a bit better. I feel like the capacitor is definitely a bit better. But you have to be careful with the capacitor on this ship. If you have trouble with the capacitor, I definitely recommend that you try out to fit some of the capacitor rigs, or maybe even some integrations where you put some capacitor stuff as well as some power stuff, and maybe auxiliary thrusters for speed. But at the end of the day, it's important to build the ship the way you prefer to fly it, the way you like the ship. And at the same time, it's also important that you take advantage of the ship's stats. That means obviously no hybrid tanking, that's cursed. That means, don't fit missiles. Well, actually missiles, in certain occasions, missile troll build actually is very funny to use. So missiles are kind of in the gray area when it comes to builds. Since I actually use missiles on some ships that should not be using missiles, because it just is funny and it just works troll build. But obviously don't use lasers, don't use railguns, don't use stuff like that on the Stabber. You should be using weapons that the ship can take advantage of, or in some cases, if you're flying some troll ships, I guess missiles are fine. But for the Stabber, or can the Stabber actually be used as a troll Stabber with missiles? I mean, projectile turrets don't use capacitors, so using missiles would kind of, ruin the whole reasoning behind using missiles, because usually you use missiles on certain ships because their primary weapon is using capacitor to improve your capacitor. With the case of this ship, you don't have to use missiles because projectile turrets don't use capacitor. So in this case, I guess turrets are still the only option that I would go with. And maybe, I'm thinking, should I actually depending on the target, usually when I send out the stabber, I usually know that the target is not going to be stabbed. The reason why I actually fly the ships I fly are stabs, because if I'm solo, then I really need a lot of points or need a lot of DPS. And this ship is kind of designed for the old school combat with no stabs, which is actually how I prefer to fly the ship. I really prefer to fly the ship the old school way. It does work when you find a target with no stabs, and when it does work, you have a lot more fun than flying the high DPS ships. I have a lot of high DPS ships now, and I can still say after what's been 5 years now for me, I'm still having a lot more fun with longer bells, still having a lot more fun with ships that primarily have a lot more tank than they have DPS. I enjoy the DPS ships as well, and they get the job done. I use DPS ships when I need to get the job done, but at the same time I also use the tanky ships when I really want to enjoy the game, and this is one of those ships where I mean, I definitely have to fly this a lot more now. Just because it's very fun to use. So my thoughts on the Stabber 2 rework, or should I say Stabber 2 change. I think rework might be the most accurate description, since it did receive a skill description change, or well, rework in this case. It's amazing. That's simply put, it's what it should be from day one. And I think a lot of players will definitely enjoy this ship a lot more now. Not saying the previous Stabber 2 was bad. The previous Stabber 2 had a crazy speed tank, since it had a very good speed bonus, very good base speed as well. I think it still has the very good base speed, but it lost the bonus on speed. But even without that speed bonus, it is still fast. It is still a very small ship, very small signature, very maneuverable, and it is not going to suffer much from the lost speed. DPS wise, it's pretty good, really good actually, and tank wise, the main change obvious on a tank, it's amazing, fantastic, absolutely no complaints about it. Simply put, this ship is much more enjoyable in some cases. I would say much more fun than before, although the fun part can be subjective, to be honest. But if we look at the Vagabond and if we look at the Stabber 2, yeah, now we can say that it will play like a Vagabond. I'm fairly sure of it, and I'm honestly more than excited to experience that in this game as well. But with that being said, that would be it for the Stabber 2. I think I'll be flying this a lot more often than usual now, depending on the target after all, but I really want to fly the ship a lot more than usual, since I really need to see that new bonus in action. And well, with that being said, do tell me what you think about the Stabber 2 change. I'm very curious what you guys think about the recent update. And well, with that being said, hope you guys enjoyed. If you would like to support me, feel free to like and subscribe. And with that being said, stay safe, fly safe, and as always, I'll see you next time.
Warp drive active.